Let's get into it. We got Dave Chappelle's take on Israel and Palestine. Then we got Joe Rogan's take on Israel and Palestine, but not what's going on in the Middle East, more so what's going on here at home. Dave Chappelle doesn't think that people who are pro-Palestine should be fired from their jobs. Joe Rogan has a perspective as well. I'm going to be showing you Dave Chappelle's perspective, and then I'm going to be showing you Joe Rogan's perspective. And although these gentlemen are very, very close, they differ in opinions on this, and I would love to see them talk about it, but we probably won't. Dave Chappelle triggers walkout from Boston show after comedian slams Hamas attacks, Israel's war crimes, and pro-Palestine students get their job offers nixed, taken away. Do you think that's right? That's the question I'm asking you right now. Do you think that's right? Now, I have a clip of Sagar from Breaking Points reading what happened at the whole event, because Dave Chappelle is notorious for having people lock up their phones. So when he does a show, nobody has any video evidence. And in this situation, thank God. I mean, this is exactly why he does this sort of thing. So these things can't be caught on video whatsoever. Good move on his part. Before I get there, I just want to bring you to IamCoachColin.com, where you can get a Public Enemy #1 shirt. You can get a Soul Not For Sale shirt, or you can get the shirt that I got on right now. All of that is at IamCoachColin.com. Discount code is IamCoachColin, all capital letters. All one word, one L in the name Colin, gets you 10% off. Now let's hear Sagar give you the retelling of exactly what happened at this comedy show.
Some in the crowd got up and left. Quote, toward the conclusion of his show, he said of Israeli policies and Hamas attacks that two wrongs don't make a right. Now, we have one report from an individual who apparently did attend this show and described it for all of us. Let's put this up there on the screen. They say, quote, I saw Dave Chappelle last night at the Boston TD Garden. It was sold out, so I would say 22,000 people were there. 3/4 into the show, he said, I wanted to address what's going on in Israel-Palestine. He specifically said Palestine and said it before Israel. He said what happened on October 7th wasn't right, but what is going on isn't right and not just. You can't kill innocent civilians like that, and the whole world stood silently and watches. Someone shouted at him from the crowd, said, shut the F up, Dave. He went nuts and yelled back, no, you shut the F up. You don't take tens of billions of dollars from my country to go kill innocent women and children and then come and tell me to shut the F up. He said, don't come begging for my money from my country and then go drop bombs on kids and cut off innocent people, water, and electricity. You have the audacity to pay to come see me and then tell me to shut the F up. No, you shut the F up. The crowd started clapping and cheering for him and saying, yes, Dave, chants of free Palestine, and said, damn right, free Palestine. He went on a 15-minute rant about being Muslim, and the Israelis are projecting what's wrong with them on Muslims, and the crowd kept on cheering. It was surreal. Crowd was a typical Boston demographic, 80% white, 5% black, quote, the rest Latin and others. So that's a eyewitness report.
We can't confirm this report. This is just floating around on social media. But I will say that does sound like Dave Chappelle, doesn't it?
Absolutely sounds
yeah.
I mean, for the inevitable of like, why are you listen, Dave, and this is always a difficulty, he often veers in the direction of social commentary interspersed with his comedy.
That's what he does.
That's what he, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's what he's always done. I mean, he did that entire special after George Floyd that he put out. Like, was that comedy? Like, not really. You know, it's a piece of social, and that's fine. I have no problem with that. My point, though, is that it's clear that this will become a major lightning rod, not just for audiences, but how comedians and others are going to handle it, because it just highlights, like, we're all trying to process something together as a culture at the same time, and it invites, you know, a lot of controversy. This is where I'm sure Dave is happy for the fact that nobody was recording or watching the show while it was happening. Good for him, honestly. I support that policy. But yeah, I do think it shows the difficulty. And also, Dave is not a person to keep his mouth shut. He's going to say what he thinks, which I support. I support 100%.
He's a free,
he's a free man.
He's going to do and say what he thinks, whether you agree or disagree. That's certainly been his style from the beginning. I mean, if you go back and watch
I'm kind of surprised that these two had that view of everything Chappelle said. I thought they would, they really have a mainstream media look to them. They seem like they have a lot of the same talking points. From my understanding, Crystal Ball, the lady here, she actually comes from mainstream news. I don't know about the gentleman, but I know she does. So I was a little surprised to hear them talking about this, like, kind of supporting what Dave Chappelle has done. I myself have been following Dave Chappelle forever. One of the main inspirations that got me into comedy. And he has always been like this. And on top of that, I'm pretty sure Chappelle season 2, the show, he does touch on this topic a little bit in his stand-up. There's some like behind the scenes footage. He does touch on this. This is not the first time he's ever spoken on this. So I knew for sure that he would be on the side of the Palestinians, 100%. Now we're going to be hearing Joe Rogan's take on all of this, and it's a little different than what you heard when you heard Chappelle saying. And again, shout out to Chappelle, telling it like it is, as you should, because you know what? Whether you're whichever side you're on, you have to be able to speak about it. You have to. And if people are going to brand you as anti-Semitic this or pro innocent people perishing that or whatever, what have you, man, you have to be able to speak. And Dave Chappelle has always been about that since the beginning. Let's get into the Joe Rogan clip where they're talking about this exact subject. And I want you to answer again in the comments. Do you think if someone supports Israel or if someone supports Palestine, they should be fired because their employer doesn't agree with that view?
I said about Israel on your podcast, no one can say that I'm a Hamas defender, right? I'm very pro-Israel. But there are people right now that, for expressing pro-Hamas beliefs, are being, there's companies saying, we're never going to hire you to
Yes.
college kids. There's all kinds of stuff like this is going on where I'm totally against it. I think people should be absolutely free to make these stupid arguments, and we should inform them. We should argue, right? We should have a conversation,
Right, but do you
even when
think-
it's like a really bad belief.
But do you think that you would want someone to work for you if you found out that they were pro-terrorist? Like
No,
if you,
probably
Like
not.
if you found if some
No,
guy
I wouldn't.
says he's into ISIS,
No.
and he's wants to work for your company, like you would say, "Hey, I'm not going to hire you because you have decided that you're pro-Taliban."
I wonder about that. Because I want to say yes, but my friend Noam Dorman, who owns a Comedy Cellar, he says that he has people working in his kitchen. This guy, both his parents are from Israel, very pro-Israel. It's actually the most important issue to him in life, perhaps. He has people working in his kitchen from the Middle East that believe all the propaganda, all the anti-Semitic propaganda that they've been fed, that many people in the Arab world are fed. They believe the Jews are controlling the media, the Jews are everything, right? And they're
Right.
totally anti-Israel. And maybe some of them are even happy about the Hamas attack. But he says as long as they keep their politics out of work, they don't alienate customers, and we treat each other with respect, I'm not going to say I'd fire you or I wouldn't hire you.
Well, good for him. That's a very beautiful and Jesus-like way of approaching the world.
That really is. We got 5 more minutes of that clip, but that's a very surprising view from Cole, because I know from watching the podcast he was in with Rogan 2 times, he's very, very pro-Israel, to the point where it seems like I called it rosy-colored glasses towards what Israel does. And to hear his view be that people shouldn't get fired for supporting Palestine is actually very interesting, and I applaud him for that. That's solid, because I feel the exact same way. That's how it should be. Now, here's where I disagree with Joe. Joe is right away saying, what if you found out someone who was working for you supported ISIS? Now, when you see people, and I'm not going to blanket statement, but when you see people in the streets and they're supporting Palestine, they're saying that they don't want to see innocent people die, that doesn't mean that they're also supporting Hamas and everything Hamas has done. And that's why a lot of people, they get mad when they hear this statement, but it is a very complex issue, because you cannot just fuse together. Now, keep in mind, Hamas was elected by the Palestinians. You can't just fuse together these two people. I said this to someone else. I'm like, you don't agree with everything the Biden administration does. But could somebody fuse you together and say, well, if you're there, if you're in America and Biden's, you support everything he does? You'd be like, no. Completely different. That's the government. the government's doing things. I don't support what they're doing necessarily. And if you think there's no one in Palestine that feels that way, you're crazy. So for Joe to just right away connect Hamas to the Palestinians, to the innocent people, to the people who are not a part of Hamas, I think that's a misstep. That's a misstep. He shouldn't be doing that, in my opinion. Let's get back to the clip.
Yeah. I mean, no, but I think ideally it should be more and more the way we approach the world, because I don't think you persuade people by persecuting them.
Right. The difference between that and someone holding beliefs because they came from a particular part of the world is very different from someone going out on the street and yelling it, holding up banners and flags,
I would agree.
using bullhorns. And that is what someone might do at a protest. So if you were at a pro-ISIS protest and you were screaming about ISIS's caliphate and that this is the just way of life and this is what God wants, like, I probably don't want you working at Subway. You're probably not going to be the dude I want to be making sandwiches next to. And I'll probably, if I'm hiring at an auto repair shop and this guy thinks he's going to be a martyr if he blows himself up, maybe I'm not going to hire that guy. Maybe I'm not going to hire the guy that thinks that it's okay to talk little kids into wearing a fucking vest and walking into a school.
I agree.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't like the idea that there's a political litmus test for having a job.
Right.
And this is part of what's happening with diversity, equity, and inclusion statements, is that all over the country there are these jobs, professorships at universities, where in order to be hired, you have to sign and say, I support diversity, equity, inclusion, and a long paragraph of values you may not hold. Why should I need to sign on to that? It's to be hired to teach math.
Right.
I get very uncomfortable with that.
It gets slippery because you get to political ideologies that you're forcing people to subscribe to.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a slippery slope, right? I mean, if you were a Catholic and you would not hire Baptists, because Baptists were fools, you only believe in hiring Catholics, that would get weird, you know? But those, we're okay in that sense that most people of differing Christian persuasions are comfortable with each other. Lutherans are comfortable around Methodists, and they look at Baptists the same way they look at Catholics. Or maybe they look at Mormons weird. Mormons are that's a weird one, but
they're very nice though.
They're the nicest people. Yeah. But it's very common for people of different branches of Christianity to work together and have no problems. But it's when things get weird is when you like one thing is way worse than the other thing, or one thing opposes the existence of another thing. Now we're getting to extreme differences, like if the difference between the Hamas and Israel, like if you're getting to that. Or if you're getting to, Nazis and the Jews, or if you're getting to, there's things that you can get to where you're like, okay, this is valid,
Yeah.
These are valid reasons to not be worried. But if you do that and it keeps pushing in a certain direction, it could get to Catholics hating the Protestants. And that's what the fuck happened in Ireland. They were blowing each other up. I mean, when I went to Belfast, Northern Ireland, for a UFC once, there's police cars that are covered with like steel plates to bomb-proof them.
Wow.
Have you ever seen it? It's
No.
wild. It's wild. And the people that live there, there's people that are there right now that still remember the IRA and they remember all the bombings and the terrorists and the horrible things that people from both sides of Ireland did to each other. They're two totally different countries. Northern Ireland's a completely different country than Ireland because of that, and because and a lot of it was wrapped up in religion. And I mean, we don't want to think that could happen, but whenever you have this thing where you're against someone who's not on your team, that could take place. You could have like a peaceful coexistence, like Baptists do with Methodists, or it could be fucking horrible, and you could other that person, and it's just a part of human programming.
So I agree with the new atheist about how many problems have been caused by religion, and I'm an atheist myself. I grew up with no religion. On the other hand, the empirical literature suggests that religious people tend to be happier. And also suggests that conservatives tend to be happier than liberals. And that's a very interesting finding to me, because I grew up in a very secular, liberal context, was never even tempted by religion, really. Like, you know how they say there's no atheists in foxholes?
Right.
I'd be an atheist in a foxhole. Like, I wouldn't even believe in God. I think if it's nowhere in me. But it's an interesting and pretty verified result, I think, at this point, that conservatives tend to be happier than liberals, less mental illness, and the religious tend to be happier than the secular. So then the question becomes, why is that? Is it because they believe in religion? Or is it explained by a third variable? Is it correlation without causation? Is it that religious people have communities, they have somewhere to go to where they see familiar faces every Sunday, and atheists lack that, or they don't have it automatically, and it's
that's certainly a
tough to
factor,
build?
right?
I think
It's
gotta
unquestionably a factor.
Got to be a factor, yeah.
Yeah, people need community. It is absolutely a part of us. And one of the things you see in primarily secular places, like if you think about New York City, there's so many people, but yet they're not friends.
They're not friends with each other. Very true. Very, very true. Now, let's get to what we were talking about in this whole thing. The Palestine and Israel. Supporting one, supporting the other, should it get you fired? I don't think so. And I wrote this down. I also wrote down live flip-flop ? Because it almost sounded like Joe was trying to pull from both places at the same time, when he clearly ended off saying, there's some things that you can't tolerate. And I guess that's true if you're an employer and that's just how you feel. But as a person who wants society to work a certain way, or would want to be gifted the same patience and thoughtfulness, you kind of do want to do what Coleman's friend was doing, which is, as long as it doesn't impact, leave it at the door. Don't let it impact work. Don't do anything to the customers. Don't get mad at customers, anything. Just do your job and leave. That's it. That's how it should really be. That's what I think, 100%. Because again, I'll bring it up. What happens when all of a sudden it's like, well, you know what? You see American flags in here. You see Trump 2024 in here all over the place. Who do you support? Oh, you support Biden. Yeah, get out. Bye, Biden. Get out. Like, how far is it going to go? It's a very slippery slope. And again, what Joe is doing, he's connecting all Palestinians to Hamas. That's not a fair thing to do. It's just not. Even if we look at it, again, I'll bring up the example. Even if you look at it like a government, not every single massive population agrees with what their government is doing in the country and abroad. And the U.S. is the perfect example. There are so many people who are like, can we stop with these wars? Can we stop with all this already? Right? For someone to come to them and say, well, you're at war all the time. You'd be like, I'm not at war. Like, what? Like, imagine you're a white person. Oh, well, you benefit from slavery. You might as well have just owned slaves. It's like, what are you talking about? That's ridiculous. Like, it just, I don't know. I don't think it's a fair connection to make. I think you can be pro-Palestine or be pro-Palestinian civilians and be against Hamas terror. I think that's very easy to do. I may not agree with everything the IDF does, but I definitely support every single friend I have over there that lives there. Even the ones that are in the IDF, I'll be honest with you. I'll be like, hey man, you work for, I've heard some messed up things about the organization that you're in, but I think you're great. I don't know. It gets way too far. And like Coleman said, he said it perfectly. There shouldn't be a litmus test. There shouldn't be a political litmus test that you have to pass in order to work at a place, because this is what's going to happen. People are just going to start lying. What kind of society are you trying to build when you do that kind of thing? People are just going to lie. And because they lie and they get into a certain environment, maybe tensions will bubble because you're completely unaware that this person is pro-Palestine or pro-Trump, and you're sitting in front of them talking about how dumb all Trump supporters are, and they're getting mad because they had to lie and say they love Biden. I don't know, man. It's a slippery slope. But let me know what you think in the comments about that. Anyway, Dave Chappelle got booed off stage. Hey, listen. For some people who hear that, that's a big thing. If you've been in comedy, that happens. You bomb. You bomb no matter who you are. You're the greatest of all time. You'll bomb eventually because you gotta say your piece. And if you're just starting, you're gonna bomb often. It's just the way it goes. So it's no big deal in reality. Anyways, guys, like the video if you haven't already. Subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell. And other than that, I am out.